Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Will here. You have a wide variety of experiences. You were in the Navy, you were a nuclear submarine officer, all the way to founding a payment fintech company that became Samsung Pay, and you led that initiative, which has really transformed mobile payments globally. And now you're involved in the EV space and still in the payment space. So I'm excited to have you here, and I'm looking forward to getting to your story.
Well, thank you, Ben, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, when you were growing up as a kid, where did this kind of passion for technology, for leadership in the space, where did that come from?
Well, I think as a child growing up in mainland China before I arrived to the United States, um, curiosity has always been there. Fortunately, my parents kind of gave us a lot of leeway, so we went out and played a lot. So that curiosity, I think, continued through um, high school and exploring new things that interested me. And then into college, when we were playing around with electronics, playing around with computers early on, playing around with motorcycles and breaking them down and fixing them. And so those kinds of curiosity led me, I think, more interested in technology. So when I ended up joining the nuclear submarine force after undergrad, um, it was a total immersion into technology. So
Hmm.
if you can imagine, um, for every nuclear submarine officer that joins the force, we have to learn everything from how nuclear power is generated and how to operate a nuclear reactor plant, how electricity is generated and operating, the generators, how do we make water, how do we make oxygen, how do we scrub our own carbon dioxide and be self-sufficient for 75 days in a row underwater. So all of that made us realize that you know you should understand how things are made so that when you it gets time for you to making things, you can apply what you've learned into a more system level approach. So I've always been very systems level thinking, and when we talk about sustainability, then it takes that whole system into account. And in fact, when I went to MIT for graduate school after serving in the Navy as the first Chinese immigrant to serve as a nuclear submarine officer, one of my favorite classes was actually Jay Forrester's systems dynamics class to look at how multivariable nonlinear systems all operate together. And it's kind of how the universe works, right? How physics, chemistry, biology, how all of that works. So that's always led my curiosity, which kind of led me then towards, a path for entrepreneurship.
Hmm. What did your family think of you when you were kind of going to this nuclear submarine program? I mean, it's not just a traditional type of like role in supporting the country, et cetera. It's much more of an intense role and potentially risking your life in a sense. So what did your kind of friends and family think?
Well, my mom probably didn't quite understand it as much, and she was a little bit more afraid. But my father was quite supportive. And for me, it was my mentor when I was co-oping for IBM at the time. He was a former nuke in the
Huh.
Navy, and he inspired me to look into the program. And for me, I was very fortunate to have gotten 5 scholarships to go to the University of Washington, practically, without the burden of tasking my parents, and they couldn't afford it anyway. So I felt quite fortunate and blessed to have the opportunities for this country. So in some ways, it is a way to pay back for my service, and then it's another way is it's for me to serve to learn while I learn to serve at the same time. So I felt very fortunate to have gone through that experience with the Navy, and my two sons, actually two of my three sons, one just graduated from the Naval Academy, and he's going to be a nuclear submarine officer, and then another one's graduating in another year and a half.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you kind of get into the tech space and starting a business? What were some of the steps you took after you're finished with the Navy?
So for me, one of the I remember in one of my product development classes in MIT, our professor Eppinger at the time, he asked the class a very simple question. He says, "What's the difference between innovations and inventions?" And of course, lots of
Hmm.
hands went up. And after a while, he stopped us and he says, "Let me give you my simple definition." And he says, "Innovations are simply inventions that made it into the marketplace and got mass adoption. There are many inventions, but very few innovations." And what I learned later is this chasm to go from invention to innovation requires a huge amount of tenacity, entrepreneurship, product market fit, fundraising, team building, execution. So it's the valley of shadow of death that you have to cross. But for some, they can feel that that's their calling. And no matter what, this is what I felt the calling for, to take inventions and bring it into innovation. And sure enough, I was given the opportunity to turn some of these inventions into innovations. And even though I knew nothing about how to start a company at the time when I was still finishing up my thesis, somehow I just felt compelled to just dive in with both feet and then learn as we go. So we jumped in the deep end.
So I think you saw this need for like a more like software security platform, that was designed for application developers. Where did that kind of idea come from? And then how did you start executing it?
So that first company that I started, I actually helped another company in the very beginning, before I started my first company, and when I helped that company, go from just about to folding up to actually getting their first customers, it was very satisfying. But I wasn't in control, and
Hmm.
frankly, the founder kicked me out of that particular startup. So I ended up starting my own, where it was me that was fully responsible. I raised capital, built the team, and what I saw was a technology at that time. It was the early days of the web that could be applied on access management for the web. It was a bitmap indexing technology that had very fast adjudication, but it was just sitting there, technology not finding a product market fit and a solution that was needed. So I think one of the things that I pride myself in, and I later discovered that was kind of what I had a passion for, was just connecting the dots to try to find an invention that makes an application or create value for customers that really needed it, that was much better. So bringing that through was, you know, kind of led me towards being a product type CEO and product type of entrepreneurs that really looked at how to apply invention and turn it into innovation.
Mhm.
So that chapter was us having a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, rapidly building prototypes, getting customer feedback, and eventually our first real customer, which was BEA Systems, um, ended up wanting to turn this into BEA Enterprise, WebLogic Enterprise Security. So they bought our company, and we had
Mhm.
a positive return for our investor, and that allowed me to then get into fintech.
Mhm. So after the company was acquired, like, did you take a bit of a break, or did you kind of like what were you thinking at the time of what to do next?
Yeah, no, I don't think I took a break at all. In fact, my wife keeps harping on me at I'm on my fifth and sixth startup right now, and I haven't taken a break in between any of them. So yeah, after that company was sold, I was right back at it because I was looking at another invention because I'm always curious and I see inventions. So I saw another invention. I'll show you. This is actually kind of funny. This is back in late 2001, early 2002, when phones still look like this. Well, the mobile operator controlled the SIM card, which controlled the phone, right? So that's a walled garden. Well, this inventor actually created a virtual SIM card whereby they put a microcontroller between the phone and the SIM and put it in here so that the phone thinks that the controller was a SIM and the SIM thinks the controller was the phone. So we essentially hijacked it. And the SIM is just a 7816 smart card. So we added a smart card reader in the back and we thought, hey, why don't we build a, uh, a mobile wallet for you to have, remote transactions where they send you a text and you can finish the transaction with a card present transaction on your phone. It's safer, it's more cost effective for the merchants. Why wouldn't you like it? Well, as it turns out, it was way more difficult than I thought. We couldn't crack the chicken and the egg problem. And within about 4 months, I said, holy and we better pivot or else we're going to die. So we took this idea and we ended up um, saying, hey, instead of a two-sided platform where you can't solve the chicken and the egg problem, meaning consumers don't care unless there's lots of merchants accepting it, and merchants don't care unless there's already a lot of consumers using it. So you're stuck, in the middle. So we say, okay, let's pivot. Let's turn that idea here into this idea where we turned this into a mobile point of sale. So this is Square before Square. We added a magstripe reader here. We added a printer from an infrared, a pin pad on the back, and we turned this into the first pocket-sized point of sale in the world. So this company was ended up being acquired by Verifone, and then the smartphones came along. And says, well, if you have a smartphone, in an audio jack, you don't really need that anymore. So why not plug a little reader right into the audio jack? So this is right around the same time as Square. In fact, I met with Jim McKelvey at Jack Dorsey's apartment, and we were talking about this solution. And so we ended up becoming the largest supplier to all of these people like Intuit, PayPal, and we white labeled it and sold them hardware, software, services. And so it was very different. We couldn't raise capital out here in Boston, not quite like what's happening in Silicon Valley. So we had to do more strategic investments, and as such, that company was acquired by Ingenico in 2012 or so, and then that was 10 years after me trying to do a mobile wallet. So my co-founder George Warner and I were sitting around in Miami, actually, of all places, and at his place, and we said, you know, why hasn't this is 2012? Why hasn't mobile wallet come about yet? Well, we know why. It's because when they're not accepted at the point of sale, forget it, right? And contactless payment and NFC is still far away. So, and it's going to take years before they get, more popular. So George actually invented a technology called magnetic secure transmission, and we were able to transmit magnetic signals through a loop of wire to use existing magstripe point of sales to communicate contactlessly. So we ended up showing this to Apple, which was already locked into the iPhone 6 at the time, towards Apple Pay with NFC only, and then we got Samsung and Visa to invest in us, and at that time, Samsung ended up acquiring our company to turn it into Samsung Pay. So I spent 3 years as global co-GM of Samsung Pay and helped take that little technology and that little magnetic secure transmission technology and embed it into just about every smartphone from Galaxy S6 forward. And so we got billions of phones embedded to compete against Apple Pay. So that was part of the adventure for the last company. And so after 3 years of that, what I recognize is that we have such a fragmented environment here in the United States, and compared to what's going on in China with WeChat Pay and Alipay and the super apps that are combining not just payments but also rewards, engagement, all into an ecosystem owned by the consumer, their own universal commerce application. And I felt that was truly missing here in the US, and that became my next mission at OV Loop, is to build that new architecture of a commerce operating system. And I've been doing that for the last few years, and we're in the path of turning that into a commercial solution, and then we're also starting to look at strategic investors that can be part of this new trusted commerce community. And yeah, so it's been continuous adventure. And at the same time, about three and a half years ago, one of my key investments in the mobility space, I've been passionate about electrification of mobility for a very long time. I've invested in multiple EV companies, drone companies, and one that caught my particular attention was Professor Ian Hunter out of MIT, one of the most prolific inventors. He had invented a brand new motor technology that is what we called a smart wheel technology that allows it to sense the road and be able to not only spin the wheel and locate it in the wheel itself, but move the wheels up and down at the same time. So to create much more space in between the wheels so that to make the vehicle smaller on the outside, but roomier on the inside, but much more agile, smooth, and efficient. Just like we as animals, we want our motors to be agile, efficient in the use of energy. The same thing with electric vehicles. So I loved the invention, but the hard part of taking it into innovation, I knew that they needed someone like me to join in to help make it happen. So I ended up pouring a lot of my own capital and resources, and I knew that if I didn't do it, the company was going to die. And so again, this felt like a calling. And so the two companies that I'm currently engaged in, both OV Loop, I feel that that's a calling for what we can do for society to turn this invention of a new digital commerce super app to make it into reality here in the US. It's hard, but I feel like we're on the path and we can do this. And then the same thing on the EV side, right? You got this tremendous invention with this road sensing smart wheel. We need to turn that into smart wheel powered, ultra efficient vehicles that are ultra smooth, focused for the last mile delivery as well as ride hail of the future, or transportation as a service of the future. So that's those are the things that are consuming the most of my bandwidth right now.
So, like in terms of when the acquisition happened for the LoopPay system, did you kind of expect it, something like that to happen with Samsung because they wanted to compete with the Apple Pay solution? Like, why do you think that they wanted to embrace your solution, which seemed like a lot of people wanted to do the NFC payment, and then some of these places were even willing to go and change their systems? Why were they more keen to use your approach and work with the existing infrastructure?
Great question. So for us, we let them test our solutions and to do their own market tests. So when they went out to the US, they can see that at that time it was, less than 40% of the merchants had NFC terminals, right?
Hmm.
So, and then they did a survey in Korea, where their home country is. Less than 10% had
Huh.
NFC at that time. So the only thing that was there was magstripe. So if you're going to launch a mobile payments, if you can't have NFC on the merchant terminals, what kind of user experience is that? So they saw the advantage of this technology, which is why Samsung Pay became the number one mobile wallet in all of Korea,
Hmm.
almost overnight.
Huh.
And it was because of that magnetic secure transmission that use existing rails to be able to put a new bullet train on it. Right? So
Yeah.
it was a better experience. So I think they did their homework, and that's why they adopted our technology. And of course, they brought our team on board to speed up, and they knew that we had payment experience to speed up the launch. So we were acquired in February, and we ended up launching in September, Samsung Pay, right? So it was very
But
fast. And the Samsung team and the Samsung culture is just phenomenal. When they put their thoughts behind something, they just throw their resources. Very dedicated people there, and it was a fun experience for us to launch that. But you know that was cool.
yeah, so I mean, WeChat is so dominant in China. I mean, it's like the internet basically there. The US is just it's a different type of culture, but I think that people do want this kind of convenience of with a super app. Like, how do you plan on providing more utilities through the super app than the traditional maybe Venmo or other types of payment systems? And then also, what's your like kind of way that you want to be able to acquire customers? Like, what are some of the ways you're thinking about that currently?
Great question. For us, we're not just a peer-to-peer payment. Um, For us, we're really thinking about the entire ecosystem of how do you bring merchants and consumers closer together. So bring that network of merchants to the consumer and close the loop between the buyer's wallet and the seller's POS, so that the most valuable real estate really becomes inside of this digital super app. So there's
Hmm.
still valuable real estate physically, in the town centers and the front of the malls, but um, where people are going to expect that level of convenience is how do you let them not only fulfill payments, but automatically have rewards, engagement messaging, and never be spammed, so that the messaging can be yours and yours alone. And when, your choice, are you going to be, letting this merchant in your loop? If not, one click of a button, no more messaging. But if you want to message them, you can message them directly. So this bi-directional messaging, utilizing some inventions that we have with one tap voice powered messaging, the ability to tap and pay in the physical world, the ability to one click pay, in the online world or the in-app world. So across devices, iOS, Android, Mac, PC, across channels, online, in-app, in-store, across tender types, so that you can offer not just your Visa, MasterCard, but also whatever tender type that suits you. Reward cash, right? Coupons. And so when you bring these things together, we also think that it's not just about retail, because the community also includes, sports and entertainment, your favorite sports teams, your nonprofits, your schools and university. We just signed up our first university that is joining the loop. We really see this as a digital community, and eventually, when your identity is right there, it's controlled by you because you own the keys to this kingdom. If you don't own the keys, you don't own the data. So today,
Hmm.
we don't really have our own private digital wallet, because it's just our data stored, in Amazon or TJ Maxx or Apple Pay or Samsung Pay. It's them that have one key that locks everybody's data. So is that really our data? in our wallet. So we're using the latest blockchain era cryptography called BIP32 and also BIP39 for recovery. So we're letting you derive your own keys. It's your data. We can't see the data that you store is fully encrypted by you. We back it up for you, and so that you can use it across any device. And that way, you can store whatever you want in there. So your cards, of course, bank accounts, ID, membership, your passwords, passports, crypto keys, NFT. We don't really care. This is your vault. You should own it. And when
Hmm.
you own that data and your identity is there, who you share that data with then becomes your choice. And now when we can bring this environment together, it becomes something that is what we called, instead of the digital Wild West, it becomes really the the West that is now properly infrastructured with proper security, proper law and order, proper plumbing, proper streets and roads, right? And then in order to get there, we're going to need the rails to go from, let's say, the mature East Coast at that point, to have the Intercontinental Railroad to be able to carry you to the West. So we want to build that infrastructure, this new real estate. That doesn't mean that you're going to get rid of your old one. You're still going to go shop. You're still going to do all of these things. And you're still going to visit the merchant's website, the merchant's app when you need it. But this is one super app that belongs to you. This now becomes a super valuable real estate. And how do you get to market is your question. How do we get to market is we work with some of the largest retailers and brands that want to be in their customers' super app. So when they invest in this new real estate, how do they invest? Well, they spend the money to drive their customers and to gift their customers this new gift of this super app. And when they're first to do it, they get pinned at the top of the wallet, essentially at the front of the mall, right? Or the center of town. So when you look at it in that light, you start to realize what we're building is a brand new architecture that that is like when the first mall came together in 1954 by a guy named Victor Gruen. It was an Austrian architect, immigrant, that had this crazy idea that everybody thought he was absolutely nuts, because before that, it was all separate, right, storefronts in the suburbs. It was Sears with their mega parking lot. It was Kmart, separate side of town, major parking lot. It's standalone stores, just like the standalone apps today. They want you to download their app, right? And everybody thought it was crazy for Macy's and JCPenney to be under one roof. You're nuts. But as soon as that first store or first mall actually got built with the right infrastructure for the entire community, large, small merchants, and it was architected in such a way that it attracted the community to come together, guess what? Within 6 years, by 1960, there were 4,000 malls. By the mid 80s, there were 30,000 plus malls representing more than 50% of all retail. And Victor Gruen was credited by Malcolm Gladwell as the most influential architect of the 20th century.
Huh.
So that's the kind of impact, and that's the kind of thinking that we really have to architect. And if you don't have that architecture in mind from the start, it won't magically happen. You can't just take, a Sears tower and then just all of a sudden turn it into a mall. Just like you can't take a application that belongs to one operating system or one bank or one retailer and just add a bunch of stuff and make it into a super app.
Mhm. So how do you manage now building this super app, which is, it's quite a goal you have here, and then also with this EV focused motor that you're building out, this active suspension motor, like how do you manage two different things at once? And two of them are not just like the average project; these are ambitious projects.
Um, Less sleep, more passion. It's very hard. It is very hard, especially during this time. The you know raising capital is hard.
Yeah.
So it's the winter time, but when you have passion, and I've survived two of these winters already, when I started my first company after the dot-com bubble had already popped. And and then, I was on my third company right in the middle of, the great financial crisis. Nobody wanted to fund. But to me, it's about creating value. And if we can work, and I've always, been one of how do you create value? And, my first company was sold to the value that we created for our first customer. Um, and, when I was going through the financial crisis, it was a strategic investor to help create more value for the point of sale space. And right now, it's the same thing. If we can create value for the large retailers and brands, and for the right financial institutions that have the foresight to want to be there first in this digital community. We think they're the ones who are going to help us get there for OV Loop, and then same thing for Indigo. For Indigo, it's about finding real customers that need our solution. Customers like FedEx and Walmart, and they need to perform delivery in a much better, more efficient EV for their drivers to do their jobs and perform these deliveries because it's razor thin margins. So how do you create more value using this new technology? Same thing with people like Uber, right? And taxis. How do we give them a smoother, better EV that saves their drivers money and provides better ride experience for their customers? So focus on the value creation, and we can get to innovation and never give up. And that's, pour that passion in there, because wherever your focus goes, your energy is going to flow there.
Mhm. Yeah. Why do you think you've had such a focus on financial and payment-oriented companies? Like, why do you think that's been such a strong driver for you?
I think it's natural when you get good at your craft. There's that old, 10,000 hour adage.
Hmm.
Um, and and the more deeply you dive into a particular area, um, I think the more you gain insights that maybe other people don't necessarily get, so that you're in a better position to solve a problem or to add additional value. So for the last 2 decades, I've been very focused on this ecosystem, which is normally very complex when I first naively dove into mobile wallets back in 2002. So I think learning from that and then adding to that and then applying the principles um, of efficiency and I think it's natural. I think anybody, you kind of look at their background. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that may see something hot and then all of a sudden they dive in, but they may not have enough hours in that area, whether it's AI or EV or whatever it is. But if you have a passion for a long time, it helps you stick with it and learn more and more along the way that then allow you to contribute and create value.
Well, Will, I think that's all the questions that I had. So I appreciate you coming on. You have an incredible story. I mean, you've built so many different interesting companies. You're now have two different challenging, exciting projects that you're working on, that both have potential to completely revolutionize separate industries and change the everyday lives of a lot of people. And you've already done that before. So, I'm excited for what you'll do next and appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben, for having me on, and enjoyed our discussion today.